What's up, guys? Welcome back to Point Kentucky. My name's Hunter Mitchell. This is Leah Emma. How you doing, Leah?
I'm doing great, Hunter.
Good. Cats sweep their way into the round of 32 after a 3-0 victory over Wofford tonight. Let's start with that. Just first impressions from that match. What you see from the Cats?
Really great offensively, and I think they put a lot of pressure serving-wise. They didn't maybe have a big defensive game, not big defensive numbers, but they played clean volleyball. There wasn't any stat that stood out really big time. I mean, they hit efficiently. They did things that we're used to them seeing. There wasn't anything that we went like out of the book, like, oh my God, they had 60 assists or something like that. So they played clean volleyball. That's what you want in the first round. Nothing crazy, nothing too flashy, just playing Kentucky volleyball how they've been playing the past, 16 games.
Especially whenever your starting lineup has two freshmen at Molly Tuzzo, Brooklyn DeLay, encouraging to see them come out and play clean volleyball. There weren't any shank passes from Molly or hitting errors from Brooklyn. Brooklyn didn't have a hitting error, I think, until late set two, so she was playing completely clean that entire time. Let's talk about Brooklyn. Out of the back row tonight especially, she clobbered some balls out of the back row tonight. I don't think she missed on one. There might have been one where it was an off set, and so she just kind of tipped it, but it wasn't an error. Otherwise, she was near perfect in that back row, looking like you and Allie when they played here. I mean, I asked Craig about that in the press conference. What is it about Brooklyn that makes her so much like Leah and Allie and all that? And she's got a feel for the game. And I think part of that too is her size, her hitting down on the ball. Being a bigger outside hitter, that gives you an advantage. Obviously, you're not having to make up as much ground in the air. But I mean, Brooklyn was incredible tonight out of the back row.
Yeah, and they used her probably the most we've ever seen her on the back row. We asked her that on Postgame on ESPN. I was like, that's the most. So if they even ran her in serve receive, which we really haven't seen. And I was like, was that something you worked on because you knew the type of block or defense that they were going to run? And she was like, nope, we just had a connection and it ran. And I mean, it worked really, really well. Anything up the middle today worked extremely well because Wofford was only putting up one block. And when you have one blocker up against big hitters like Z and Brooklyn, it's going to be really, really hard to stop that.
And it's funny because when you get into this tournament, that's when you begin to see more of those strategies of like, we're going to commit, two blockers to this pin, or we're going to commit one blocker everywhere. Kentucky's one of those teams where they have so many options. You might see some teams try and say, we're going to have to put up at least one block at every pin. So you might see that. Problem is, you put one block against Reagan or Brooklyn or Elise, it's not usually going to go well. It's one of those things where if you're scouting Kentucky right now, I don't know the answer. I mean, maybe you do. You played this game. You still play this game. Maybe you know the answer to stopping Kentucky. Right now, I don't know how you slow them down unless the simple answer of serve receive. But again, they're so good in serve receive right now. I'm not sure how you slow them down.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing to really do is put them out of system. But Wofford did a good job of that multiple times of getting them out of system, but then it was their block setup. So if you're going to put a team out of system, that block setup has to be near perfect, hip to hip. You're pressing over, as textbook of as a block as you can get, and they weren't doing that. So then they got advantage of Kentucky was still hitting the way they wanted to because they weren't putting up a good enough block against them.
And even in those instances, we saw Reagan go high hands, Brooklyn do that set push over, but do it intentionally in a spot where either it was the setter taking the first contact or you just weren't getting the kill because it was too sharp. Again, this team is also so smart. That's part of it too. They aren't just big hitters that get kills because they have so much power. They're intelligent. This is a really intelligent offensive team. Emma obviously running the show, knowing where to set and who to set and when. To Brooklyn, a lot of it I think was just she was hot, and Emma was like, I'm just gonna keep feeding her. And there was a reason. 13 kills in a 3-set match in your first match of an NCAA tournament season. It's impressive. And so let's look ahead now to Baylor. This is I think again in volleyball, if you aren't familiar with the tournament, a lot of hosting teams, that second round matchup is a top 25 team, and that's the same case here with Baylor. They come in, I think they're 17-12 on the season, so again, more losses than what you're used to, but playing in the Big 12 with Kansas and Texas, a lot of really good teams, Houston this year. So Baylor's one of those teams that even though their record is what it is, they're still a top 25 team. It's going to be a really tough game. They obviously handled James Madison, which was a game a lot of people were kind of keeping their eyes on that could go James Madison's way. Baylor didn't even blink at them. What'd you see out of Baylor? I know you called that game.
Yeah, first they had Bimbe, their really tall middle. She was extremely active. They ran slides with her, kind of like how Kentucky runs Elise Getzinger, and she was automatic. Elise McGee is the big person that we're going to have to watch tomorrow. She gets kills from the back row and front row a lot. She's a junior, so she's really been in this moment before. Baylor has made the last 3 NCAA tournaments, so this is not anything new for them. And they've also made every region semifinal in the past 3 years. So this is definitely nothing new to anybody on the squad. The thing to look out for is her serve. So she does a top spin serve, which is something that you don't see as much now in volleyball, but she does it with such an efficient clip. She went on almost 5 or 6 point runs every time she went back to serve, and she had 5 aces in a 3-set match. So it's going to be really interesting to see Kentucky against that. She's really good at moving it around, so that's going to be the big thing. Serve and serve receive was like the big thing that I saw in that game. I mean, Baylor did such a good job of putting the ball on JMU's side of the court and forcing them to make errors. So it's going to be a really good matchup. I expect it to be a really, really fun game, a really back and forth game.
And that's, again, what you talked about with Baylor forcing JMU to make errors. That's what we saw out of Kentucky early in the year. They couldn't score, and they made a lot of errors because they were forced into them. Going to be important now. Let's see. We know Kentucky's gotten a lot better. This is a good early test of let's kind of see. Let's challenge you with what you were bad at early in the season and see how good you are. Obviously, they're going to target Brooklyn in the back row, especially with that top spin serve. It's going to be interesting to see how does she handle that, because Elise McGee is going to look at her out of the back row and say, we're going to target junior to freshman, see how much. We're already going to overload you because you're playing 2 matches in 2 days, and you're the outside hitter. You got the most attempts tonight, again, 31. They're going to try and overload her and see how much they can get her, see if they can get her tired, get her rattled. Brooklyn's done a really good job thus far this season of not being rattled, so hopefully that trend continues. Obviously, it's going to be important with those 3 liberos in the back row. Audrey Whitworth, Molly Tuzzo, Eleanor Bevan. They're going to have to be on their A game again. The interesting thing tonight, and I asked Craig about this in the post game, we saw a rotation where he ran Reagan in the back row. So usually Audrey comes in when Reagan rotates to the back, and she's the one that serves, but he actually left Reagan in to serve and then play defense. And I asked him about that and just said, is that a matchup thing against Wofford, or is that something you're all looking at going forward? And he kind of just said we like the ability to play Reagan in that 2-hitter rotation. We saw early in the year, again, Kentucky was struggling at times when Emma was in that front row. Reagan being in for that half rotation gives them the ability to have 3 options available. Obviously alleviate some of the pressure with Brooklyn on that left pin and Elise on the slide. So her being in the back row might be a wrinkle we see again tomorrow, especially with Baylor coming in. That's going to be a team where this is probably going to be an offensive game. I mean, both teams are really balanced offensively, like to go pin to pin, so I'm not sure it's going to be a slugfest where you're both hitting in the 150s. It's probably going to be an efficient hitting clip, and whoever plays cleaner and is able to get more kills and generate more offense is going to win. That could be a key thing to look for. Tonight, the connection between Emma and Reagan in that back row really wasn't there. They tried it several times, and it was a lot of tipping. So what is that because of? Is that because Reagan's a lefty, or is that just a connection that they're still growing?
It can be a little bit that she's a lefty, but I know they probably practice it in practice, but in a game situation, that ball's not always as perfect as it is in practice. And I think watching it a couple times, there was just a little misconnect of where the ball, because a lot of times when they ran it, Emma was moving towards the left side of the net and kind of set it back behind her. And sometimes with a lefty, you're leaving it more inside because they're closer to you than maybe someone right-handed. You throw it out to the outside and just let them go for it. And a lefty, you have to have a little bit more of a touch for it. I have a feeling it's just because they haven't done it in such a long time. And I'm guessing in practice, maybe she plays a couple of times, but every time I was in practice, Audrey was going back row for her, even in practice situations. Yesterday, when I watched her practice for the broadcast, that was not happening at all. So I was very shocked when I saw it. Me and Maggie Davis were doing the commentating, and we both looked at each other and pointed and were like, wait a second, she's still in the game. So I think it's there. They can use it. I wouldn't force it if you don't feel comfortable, because I don't think this is a time where you're like, let me force this ball back to the right back, something that we haven't seen a lot, unless you know for a fact it's going to work, because the higher and better the teams that you get, that tip is a free ball and they're coming right back at you, and they're probably slamming that down.
And that's another thing too. Usually if a right side's playing a back row, they're running it out of the right back. She's running out of middle back. That's another thing where early in the year they tried that. Reagan was playing 6 rotations before that injury, and Brooklyn was only playing 3. Now that Brooklyn has been playing 6, we haven't seen Reagan do that. So that could just be getting used to getting that back into the rotation. We'll see if he goes to it going forward, because it is nice, like you said, if you only have 2 hitters in the front row when Emma's up there, it is nice to have another option in Reagan, and she's a really good defender. I mean, obviously Audrey is your libero, so ideally you want Audrey to be your defensive player, but Reagan is so talented defensively. Also, if Emma is forced to take a first contact for whatever reason, Reagan played center in high school, so he likes having that option too. She has good hands, can keep the ball in system. So it's an interesting wrinkle that Craig is kind of throwing in there to see as Kentucky goes in this tournament. Let's see if he includes even more of that creativity. It's what you see in the NCAA tournament. It's prime example was when they played Texas in that championship game, committing 2 blockers to Logan Eggleston every time. It's not common. Usually you give a one-on-one to a middle blocker, it's going to be a bad thing for you. But he said, let's just do it, and committed to it, and it obviously worked in his favor. So if Craig says let's do it, then I'm going to give my faith in Craig and go, he knows more than I do. Let him do it. So tomorrow's going to be a fun game. I think it's going to be a challenging game. It might surprise some people if you aren't familiar with college volleyball volleyball this year. If you haven't gotten to watch Baylor or really just don't know, aren't familiar with the tournament, Baylor's a good team, and this is going to be a battle. It's another top 25 team, so this is by no means some kind of easy, like, oh, it's around a 32 game, it's an easy dub into the Sweet 16. It's not how it goes. We saw tonight even, four set matches, Louisville over Wright State, but Louisville lost that first set, and that second set was close. Wright State almost won that one too. Texas A&M took Texas to 4 at home. So this is that tournament. Anything happens. I mean, you just want to win in advance, survive in advance. Any way you can do it. Obviously, a sweep is what you want, and I think tonight Kentucky was fortunate to be able to, like, for instance, I didn't have to play Ajani Teeler in that third set, give Jordan Williams some game action in the NCAA tournament, but also give Ajani some rest. So stuff like that is important when you're getting into these, 2 games in 2 days. And it's funny, Ajani joked about that after the match, laughing about, well, Brooklyn's young, it's going to affect me more. Obviously, Ajani being a 5th-year senior, so acting like the grandmother of the group. But Cats get a big win. They looked great doing it. A lot of encouraging things moving forward. Big matchup against Baylor. Pack Rupp. If you're in Lexington, it's Friday night. Perfect thing to do on a Friday night. Nothing else to do here in Lexington. Come to Rupp. Support the Cats. It's the last match in Rupp Arena, as even if a top 4 seed goes down, and obviously in the NCAA tournament, if top 4 seeds fall, the highest seeds will then get the hosting rights. Even if all those top 4 seeds go down, and Kentucky were the next highest seed, they will not be hosting in Rupp. Obviously, with basketball playing in Rupp this year, they would have to deny that request. So tomorrow, regardless of the outcome, whether they win or lose, or whether a bunch of top 4 seeds go down, tomorrow is the final match inside Rupp Arena for Kentucky volleyball. So come to Lexington, come to Rupp. There's nothing else you got to do. It's a great match. Going to be a great game between 2 really impressive teams. Baylor's a good team this year. Great coach. And Kentucky's rolling, but this is going to be a really nice early challenge. As if they win, they will likely go to Nebraska, play in that Nebraska regional where you'd be playing either Arkansas or Florida State probably. And then if you advance to that, likely a Nebraska match, which would be box office. So make sure you come tomorrow. All starts tomorrow. Cats got to get past Baylor first. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Leah, for joining me. She'll be on the call again tomorrow. So if you aren't in Rupp, if you're out of state, that's the only reason you wouldn't be. The only reason you wouldn't be in Rupp. So if you're out of state, Leah will be on the call again with Maggie. So you can listen to her tomorrow night when you're watching the games. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We will see you guys tomorrow.